Hi, this is the last lesson of the 2D to 3D course. In it, we'll take a look at compositing in After Effects. In the previous lesson, we animated this scene. In this lesson, we need to render it and then properly import the sequence into After Effects and compose it with 2D elements. But first, let's talk about rendering. Since there is a floor in the scene, you may need shadows. But at the same time, you need to render the elements with the alpha channel, so we will use the Redshift object tag. To apply it, right-click the mouse, go to Redshift tags, and select this tag. After adding it, go to the Mate tab. Now if I turn on Redshift Render View, we can see what the alpha channel does. The floor is currently displayed on the alpha channel. So we tick here and turn on this mode. As you can see, now it is not considered in the render. All elements will be rendered on a transparent background in case you need to keep shadows. But at the same time, so that the rendering is on a transparent background. Go to the Shadow tab and click the Enabled checkbox. Then the transparency parameter is reset. As you will see, the alpha channel now displays shadows. I don't need them, so I will turn them off. This is how we set up the alpha channel. Next, go to the render settings. In the Output tab, check the resolution. Frame rate. To check the frame rate of the composition, press Ctrl D or Command D on the Mac. The project settings are opened. Check the frame rate. It should be the same. Next, select the number of frames to render. I set frame range to all frames. Next, go to the Save tab. Assign the path to save the files. Don't forget to make sure that the checkbox is checked on the alpha channel, so that the sequence is rendered on a transparent background. Also, check the settings for the render itself. In my case, they look like this. After that, press the Render button, and the sequence will begin to be processed. Since I have everything ready, I won't render. After rendering, your files will be stored in the folder you specified. Next, we move on to After Effects. We have prepared a composition in which the 2D elements of this shot are animated. We need to compose them in 3D sequences. Let's move on to importing a sequence. To add it to After Effects, go to the Import tab and select File. You can also do this using the Ctrl-I hotkey on Windows or Command-I on Mac. A window opens in which you should find a folder with sequences. Next, select one frame and tick the PNG sequence checkbox. Click Import. The sequence was added by After Effects, but FPS settings changed. Now we see that the number of frames for this sequence is 30 instead of 24. To configure the import of a sequence, go to Edit, Preferences, Import. The default sequence footage is 30 frames per second. Set it to 24 and click OK. Then re-import the sequence and delete the old one. Now we see that the FPS of the imported sequence is 24 frames per second. Add it to the composition. I will place it at the very top for now. Let's turn on the solo mode. Let's play the animation. Okay, next we need to compose this sequence with 2D elements. But before that, 2D elements will need to be converted into 3D layers to convey the depth of the entire scene, so that it can be parented to 3D elements in the sequence. For example, we will attach a diamond to the pair object, attach a shadow to the head, attach leaves to the letter D, and so on. To do this, we have to import a 3D camera and null objects, which will be parented to specific objects in Cinema 4D. Go back to Cinema 4D. And now let's think about where we need to create null objects. To parent the legs of the basketball, you will need to create a null object here. Also, for the letter D, create a null object. Also for the head and for the pair. Naturally, we will create a central null object, as we may need it. Go to the Primitives tab, and create a null object. I put the first null in the pair. The main thing is that this null object is subordinate to the animated object. I put it under submission. I'll call it pair null. Then I create this tag, external compositing. It will allow you to create imports of 0 objects into After Effects. Now let's adjust its position. It should be around here. Let's check it. You need it to move with the pair. Next, we create a null object for the ball. We put it in subordination, and we expose its position. Thanks to these null objects, we will be able to bind 2D layers in After Effects to objects in a 3D scene and get the parallax effect. Without these zeros, it will be quite problematic to do it. You can manually adjust each element or do tracking of objects. And so we created a null object, placed it. Now we apply tag external compositing. For the head, for example, it is not necessary to create a separate null object. You can apply a tag to it. But notice that this object has an animation of the position and rotation parameters. These parameters will be written to the null object, which will be imported into After Effects. I'll show this a little later. Let's leave it that way for now. For the letter D, I'll create a null object. I copy this tag and set the position of this object. I'll put it around here. Excellent. Now let's create a null that will be in the center of the composition. Apply the external compositing tag to it. Save the project so that all changes are recorded. Go to After Effects. Import the Cinema 4D program file. Drag it to Project. Next, place it in a composition. This project is displayed here in this form. Press the Extract button to import the camera and null objects. The Cinema 4D project layer can then be removed. So we have a camera and null objects. Please note that they are immediately converted to 3D layers. As you can see, these null objects are animated. Press the U key to open all the animation keyframes in the selected layers. The animation keys for the camera are also here. Now the null objects are too close to the camera and look very large, so I will scale them down. Select the null objects. Press the S key to open the scale parameter. This parameter does not change, so the animation keyframes can be deleted. Let's set the size for these objects to 5 to 10%. Now it will be easier to work with null objects. As for the null object that is rotating, in my case, I only need the position parameter to bind a shadow to it afterwards. So I'll remove the animation and rotation keyframes. Select the desired layer. Press the R key to open the animation keyframes. I hover the mouse over the clock to delete the keyframes. Now I reset the parameter values. Great. The null object doesn't rotate, it just moves in position. Just now I noticed that the null object for the pair was set incorrectly. Let's fix this. It should be centered on the pair. Initially, I set the null object based on the front view. It was also necessary to check its position in the top view. I have positioned the object. Now you need to save the project again and add it to After Effects. Go to After Effects. Delete the old project with the 3D scene and re-add the one you just saved. Place it in the scene. Press Extract. I only keep this object. Null, which we have just corrected. I will set its size to 5%. The old null needs to be removed. Let's see what we have. Great. This object is linked as needed. Now we can work with the composition. Let's place 2D elements in 3D space. I will lower the render sequence to the very bottom so that it does not overlap the layers. Now I select all objects in the scene. Next, using the Motion Tool script, I parent them to one null object. Here it is. A null object is created, and all of the selected objects are attached to it. After that, I convert them into 3D. Select them and click on this button. They disappeared from the composition, but this is not a problem. Now we will set it up. We need to move this null object to the center of the composition so that all the elements are in the correct position. To do this, press Ctrl Home for Windows and Command Home for Mac. Or manually move it to the center. The null object is now positioned in the center of the composition. But if we turn on the custom view mode, we see that these elements are too far from null objects. Due to this, we will not be able to correctly combine 2D elements with a sequence, and we will not get the correct animation. So set 0 in the position parameter along the Z-axis. Go to active camera mode. Now we shrink the null object so that all elements are correctly positioned in the composition. If we had originally used an After Effects camera, we wouldn't have had to do such manipulations, since we would have preserved the scale. But since we are using additional nulls, as well as the camera from the Cinema 4D project, we have to do such manipulations and adjust the 2D elements to this camera. Now we need to place the elements in space along the Z-axis to convey the depth of the scene. Now all the elements are on the same plane. Switch back to the active camera mode. Even if we now look at the animation, we can see that all 2D elements move in sync with the hand. And everything looks good. But to add the parallax effect, as I said, we will place the elements in space along the Z-axis. This element is not positioned at 0 on the Z-axis. So we link the diamond layer to this null object. The diamond layer is zeroed along the Z-axis so that it will be in place of the null object along this axis. Now let's set its position along the other axis. I will play the animation and see how this element moves behind the pair. Excellent. Next, we will place these leaves in the background. To do this, select the desired layer, go to the position parameter. Using the Swiss knife script using Parallax 3D, set the position of the object along the Z-axis. You can do it very quickly using it. While changing the position along the Z-axis, the size of the object is automatically adjusted. To do this, press the Parallax 3D button. Then I turn off the work of the created camera and the null object. Now select the leaves layer again. Go to the Swiss knife script and set the desired position in these lines. I set it to -50 on both lines so that there is no range of options for the script. So now the leaves are moving forward to the camera. So I set the value to 100 so that they move by the hand. You can even increase this value even more, for example to 200. Since the hand animation layer is in 2D space, I place it on top of the leaves layer. Let's play the animation. For the leaves, you can increase the parallax effect even more, so I'll set the value to 500. Now set their position like this. Excellent. Now, as you can see, the parallax effect is clearly visible, which is what we wanted. Next, we position the rest of the objects in space. I will hide these elements for now so that they do not interfere. We will set the layer with fire to about the same value as the leaves. Let's set it to 300. Select the layer and place it around here. This element must be linked to the ball. Find the required null object and link this plate to it. In the same object, set the position along the z-axis to 0. Now set the position of the object. This layer, with the feet of the basketball, will also be linked to the basketball null. Update the position along the z-axis and set the position of the layer in space. Let's see what the animation looks like. Link the text to the central null. Position them at the level with the 3D text. We will move the glasses layer closer to the camera. Select the layer and first set the value to -100. To increase the parallax effect, I will set the value to -300. Let's take a look at the animation. It's much better that way. Let's continue to display the elements. This layer is the shadow of the Lego head, so we will link it to the null object of the head. We reset the position along the z-axis and adjust the position of this object. Now let's see what the animation looks like. As you can see, the shadow is perfectly attached to the head. We do not need to manually animate either. This method speeds up the process of assembling such projects. Now let's position this element. It should be parented to the text. Notice that if I solo this object, it has a transparent background, but at the same time, it overlaps the text. So we need to position it along the z-axis, at some distance from the text layer. It will be enough to put -1. Now the layers are not in the same plane, and do not overlap each other. Set the position of the layer. We continue to work with the elements. In the foreground is the aquarium object. We can snap it to the center null object, or just set its Z position a little closer to the camera. The text in this case is located at 0. For the aquarium, I will set the value -50, so that it creates a slight parallax effect. I will set the position of this layer. Next, let's move on to the emoji layer. Link the shadow layer to it. Set its position. This element should be located slightly closer to the camera than the aquarium. So I set the value to -70 on the z-axis. For the shadow on the z-axis, I set it to 5 so that it sits behind the emoji. These objects are slightly lower so that they are not merged with the 3D text. So I will enhance the depth of the scene. Now we need to place the leaves next to the 2D text. I turn on their visibility. These layers can be linked to 2D text, or leave them as they are since they are also at 0 on the z-axis. I'll just set some small values for these layers so that they do not intersect and are visible. Let's look at the original picture. As you can see, the half of the leaf should be behind the text, and the other half should be in front of the text and glasses. But this leaf is located a little to the left and closer to the glasses. Adjust the position of the objects. I will correct the mask of this leaf to cut off the unnecessary edge. Now create a duplicate 2D text. I will spread this layer on top of the leaf object. Now I will expose this object in such a way that it overlaps part of the leaf. On the z-axis, I will set the value to -15. I will crop this layer with a mask so that it covers only part of the leaf. In this way, we overlapped part of the leaf and created the illusion that it is behind the text. Let's check how the 2D text looks on the animation for any noticeable distortions. Since the objects are not too far from each other, we do not see any bugs. Next, duplicate the Plant 2 layer and place it over the lenses of the glasses. To begin with, I will put this layer here so as not to get confused. Open the position of the glasses layer. And now we need to set about the same value along the z-axis for the plant layer. Using the script, I set the values 10 units higher so that this layer overlaps the lens. The object has shifted a little. It's okay to set its position. Cut off part of the leaf with a mask. So we fitted the leaf. But now if we play the animation, we see that the part of the leaf that is above the lens moves out. Unfortunately, we will have to edit its position manually. To do this, I create an animation key at the position of the layer. Next, for each frame, adjust the position of the leaf. For convenience, we can recolor one object using the fill effect. I'll make this object more transparent. Now it will be easier to adjust the position. For you, I will do this stage in an accelerated mode so as not to waste time. Let's see the result. Perfect. We will do the same with these leaves. To make these layers appear correctly, I scatter them along the z-axis. This layer will be with a value of 5, and this one will be -5. These leaves should fall with the letter D, so I will link them to the null object. As in the previous case, we cut off the leaves with a mask to create the illusion that they are inside the letter. With the help of an additional mask, you will need to crop these leaves at the moment when they fly past the ball. Since they are on top of this layer, it will not look correct. Select the desired layer and adjust its mask. It will be more convenient to adjust it in the final position of object D. Now I will animate the mask. Create an animation keyframe. We will do the same for the second leaf. Let's adjust the shape of the mask and animate it. Let's create another mask to cut off the leaf so that it doesn't overlap the basketball. Select the desired layer and create an ellipse mask. I set the subtract mode for this mask. I will animate this mask. You also need to create another mask for the character's head. I set the mask to subtract mode. Let's animate the masks. Copy the masks and add them to another layer with a leaf. We set up the application of masks and animate them. Let's check what happens. At the beginning of the animation, you need to adjust the masks. Now let's place the cubes in space. Some of them should be closer to the camera and some further. But before that, let's go to the last frame of the animation and take a snapshot by clicking on this button. Thanks to it, we will see where the objects should be in the scene. But let's change their position a little. I will select all of these objects. I will start them a little lower. I will take a new snapshot. Now we see the elements in space. Select the layer and set the value to 700. This object is closest to the camera. That's why I set it to such a high value. We adjust its position by checking the snapshot. To see a snapshot, I press the F5 hotkey. Let's check the parallax of this object on the animation. Yes, it reads well. Let's continue adjusting the position of the objects. I will set this in time-lapse mode because everything is the same. You just need to find the optimal values for the position of the object along the z-axis. Not to waste time, I will speed the video up. Let's see what we got. As you can see, we have got a good parallax. If you want to enhance it, you can increase the distance between objects. Go ahead. Let's see what elements were left without attention. We missed the Temple of the Glasses. I set the value to 50 for this layer on the z-axis, so that it is behind the text layer. Now we need to finalize the log. We will also cut it out using a mask. Select the layer and create a mask. Set the mask to subtract mode. I will animate the mask. I create animation keyframes and adjust the position of the mask for each frame. Let's see the result. It looks great. This is how we arranged the rendering of 3D elements and 2D objects in After Effects. The animation looks organic. There is a parallax effect and a sense of depth. We can cut out this element like we did with the log, but I leave this up to you. This concludes the lesson and the course. In the course, we covered a lot of basic things that are not only necessary for a painless transition from After Effects to Cinema 4D, but also required for improving your beginner motion designer 3D skills. Remember the main rule. To improve your skills, you need to practice as much as possible. And that's all. Thank you all. See you later.